Welcome back to Long Distance Work Life, where we help you lead, work, and thrive in remote and hybrid teams. I'm Marissa Eikenberry, a fellow remote worker, and joining me today are the co-authors of the Long Distance team, Kevin Eikenberry and Wayne Turmel.
Hello.
You don't have to go all at once.
Hey, you just told me this is your podcast. I'm just following along.
All right.
You know, when it's just the two of us, we do fine, is all I'm saying.
For those of you who've been listening to us for a while, you may have heard Kevin's episode with Wayne about returning to office. And today, all of us together have the opportunity to chat about your new book that's coming out on February 28th, The Long Distance Team. So can you guys tell us a little bit about what the book is about?
Well, we didn't talk about who's going to talk about what. So how about I just do that? So the subtitle of the book is Designing Your Team for Everyone's Success. And I suppose that's part of what it's about. The book is really about in the world of work that is continuing to change, how do we make sure that we're designing teams to get the results we want and creating the culture that we really want? So many people around culture want to think about, well, we've got one, and what we want. And so many books, Marissa, are written about, here's the culture you should have, right, which isn't really our approach. Our approach is you should determine the culture that you want. We would call that the aspirational culture. And then we try to help you think about how to create that and then how to move forward to develop and have it, even rather from being a vision to being a reality.
I think one of the interesting things about the book is the timing, which is largely coincidental.
Right.
But, you know, it's better to be lucky than good sometimes. We're at kind of a unique point where people are starting to return to the office from COVID. There's the Great Resignation. There's RTO, return to office. There's all this stuff going on. And what that does is it creates an inflection point, a moment in time where people can actually say, hey, let's think about where we go from here. You know, right. Ordinarily, when it comes to culture and making the team do whatever you want it to do, we're so busy doing it that we don't get a chance to stop and ask some questions and maybe make some choices. And that's what the book is about.
And, you know, the interesting thing I would say is for every organization that Wayne is taking off his cranky hat. For every organization that's saying, hey, we should step back and really look at this, and this inflection point gives us that time, which is correct. There are organizations that didn't take that time and are floundering, flailing, and frustrated. And this book, I think, can be the antidote to help solve some of that.
Yeah. So with that too, like, who is the long distance team really for? Is it for the leaders? Is it for the teammates? Or is it really a mix of both?
Go ahead, Wayne.
You know, it's for small L leaders. And what I mean by small L leaders is there are big L leaders. Those are the ones with leader in their name tag, right? I am the VP of this, therefore I am a large L leader. But there are plenty of people in organizations with or without positional authority who desperately want to make their workplace better. And, you know, you can be a teammate. By definition, if you're a great teammate, you are something of a leader. But this book is really for people who want to understand why their team is what it is and help lay out a plan to make it what it could be.
Yeah, one of the things we talk about in the book is there are two cultures. There's the macro culture, the organizational culture, mm-hmm. the capital L, big L leader culture, if you will, as well as the micro culture or the culture of the intact work team, project team, etc. And this book is speaking to those details, right? But on a big picture level, it can certainly help a big L leader think about this organizationally, but it really does, to Wayne's point, get at how can we roll up our sleeves and do the work that's necessary to make this happen.
Since we were talking about culture a little bit ago, so in the first couple of chapters of the book, you guys take some time to really define terms like team and culture. And some people listening, you know, might be like, these are obvious terms. We know what all of these mean. So why did you decide to spend part of the book defining what a team and what a culture really is?
Oh, I'll take that one. It's because I get a rash when I hear some of those $10 HR words. They become buzzwords.
Right.
The cranky one's back.
Hey, we've talked about this on the show before.
And that being said, culture is really as simple as this is how we do it here.
Right.
Right. But that being said, what is it? Right.
And it's going to be different for every organization.
What is the thing that we do and how do we do it? And I think one of the simple but very powerful things in the book is we break culture, this big amorphous blob of a word, into 3 pillars and say, if you think about what makes up a culture, how do you identify a culture? We call it the 3 C's. How do you communicate? How do you collaborate? How does the team come together? The word we use is cohesion, so that there are 3 C's. It makes it all lovely. But collaboration, communication, and culture, if you can identify those, you've got a really good shot at defining your culture.
Absolutely. And we've talked about that in a previous episode too. And I'll make sure to link to those in the show notes. Kevin, do you have any thoughts on that too?
No, well, I suppose I shouldn't say no and then start talking. I would just say that in part because culture is one of those words that, people who write books talk about, or is an HR word, if you will, that a lot of people, there's misunderstandings around it. And one of the misunderstandings is that, well, we've got the one we've got, and it is. Or what happened a lot over the last couple of years is we need to get our culture back to where it once was, right? And so, and what we're saying is, why don't you come to a picture of an aspirational culture that you really want, so we can be intentional about it. And again, to Wayne's point, using the 3 C's to help figure out what that actually is. Like, you've got one, but it might not be the one that serves you best in terms of productivity, in terms of results, in terms of retention, in terms of accountability, in terms of, like, we go around on the list. And so I think one of the big messages of the book is, let's be intentional about the one we want rather than living with the one we've got.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I've also really enjoyed about not only this book, but the content that you guys have been doing for many, many years now, is this idea that, like, there is no one culture. There is no one way to do things. It's going to vary by organization. And this is a perfect example of that, which I love. So given, all of this, like, this is the 3rd book in a series. You've written a book about remote leaders. You've written a book about remote teammates. How do all of these books kind of fit together?
Oh, I'll take that one. So first of all, we didn't use the word remote, and I know that you know that, Marissa.
Right.
The long distance leader, the long distance teammate, and the long distance team. And it ends up being a series. It wasn't meant that way from the start necessarily, and yet the way they're hooked together, because that's the picture of an organization, right? Like, I'm an individual contributor, I'm a leader, and we're a team. And so putting the 3 books together, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think this sort of finishes the story, if you will, in many ways. I'll say one other thing. All of them start with the words long distance. And yet we struggled, or we talked, is probably better, in all 3 as we wrote them about, man, so much of this is the same as when we were all in the same room. And so while all 3 books certainly talk about the nuances of doing these things at a distance, the principles that are underneath all 3 books apply regardless of where your team's located.
I would add something onto what Kevin said, and that is that something has changed since we were long distance leader. It used to be people were in the office, or you had people who were remote, and you tried to find a balance, and you tried to make it work, not worse. As you, Dr. Freud to the front desk.
Right.
However, now at this moment in time, we are faced with this new option, which is hybrid work. And hybrid work, the thing about a hybrid is it is neither of the parents.
Right.
It is actually its own new thing. And hybrid work, the thing that makes hybrid work different than being in the office or everybody being remote is the flexibility of time. And when you think about when do we meet and when do we meet and when do we not, and when does it matter that we get people together and when can we do something else, you're adding this element of time, which is going to require everybody to take a good hard look at how they work right now and how they're going to work in the future. And I think that sense of urgency around figuring out time and when does it need to be synchronous and when can it be asynchronous is a new wrinkle.
Yeah, it's definitely been something I've seen people talk about a lot. I do want to go back a little bit since, I accidentally said, remote leaders, remote teammates. I do know, obviously, that the books are long distance leader and long distance teammate. I wish one of you guys would have said something before I had said that question, but that's okay.
No, but you know what? That's important. That's an important distinction. Anytime we are in the middle of a change, right? There's the language that we used at the time to do that. A little inside baseball. People don't care about how our organization works, but one of the things we're doing internally is we are changing the branding and the focus of some of our content to be long distance as opposed to remote, because it includes the hybrid and everything in between. It's not just all remote. It's like at the beginning of COVID, the word was telework. That was the word. That's the word everybody used. And 6 months later, nobody was using that word. Doesn't mean that it didn't happen. And it doesn't mean that people weren't doing the exact same thing they were doing when they were teleworking, but nobody called it that. And the culture and the language and the terminology is constantly changing. So the fact that you, who live in this world all the time, right, are still kind of using certain terminology, that can create confusion when you're trying to put a team together. That's why it's so important that you include everybody in the process and make sure everybody's solving the same problem and talking about the same thing in the same way.
I know that we're coming short on our time, but I do just want to ask, is there one takeaway that you hope that readers will take from reading the book?
Building a team, creating accountability, designing a culture are all things that we can do something about. We don't have to live with what we had. We are living in a time when the world and the world of work is changing, and this is a perfect time for us to be intentional about how we want our organizations and our teams to work in the future.
I think for me, I use a quote in the book, and I know that this is very consultanty and very 1970s, and it's kind of icky, but it's a great quote. Marshall McLuhan said, "I don't know who discovered water, but it wasn't a fish."
Okay.
And by that, I mean, we live where we live, and we don't always see, we assume that everything is always like this, and we assume that everybody sees the world the same way we do. And the point of the questions in the book, which are maybe the most powerful thing, is if you ask these questions, you will have a better understanding of what you actually do and how you work. And that allows you then to say, if we change this, we can do this better.
So given that as this episode is going to come out in 2 weeks, you guys will have a book. Do you have any book launch plans or any celebrations that you're planning on doing as this book comes out?
Well, yes, we do. First of all, you've got it on the, if people are watching the video, longdistanceteambook.com. You can go there, get all the information about bonuses and things we're doing at the launch and special offers and all that sort of stuff. You get your pre-order your copy now and all that. But the book comes out on the 28th of February. On the 27th of February, we're doing an event called virtualleadercon.com. We've done a number of these before. This one is all around issues of teams, cultures in the future of work, which is largely, or it may well be long distance for you. And so Wayne will be joining me. We've got a number of other guests, experts, authors, et cetera, joining us throughout the course of the day. Completely free to join us for the day. Lots of offers about how you can get the replays and get a bunch of other great stuff, some other bonuses around the book. But you can come join us, and we'd love to have you do that at virtualleadercon.com.
I wanted to thank both of you so much for being here and talking with me about this book. I know that we've all been really excited about this book coming out. It's actually part of the reason why we started this podcast was because we knew this book was coming out. So and for those of you who are listening, thank you so much for listening to the Long Distance Work Life. For show notes, transcripts, and other resources, make sure to visit longdistanceworklife.com. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. While you're there, be sure to like and review. That helps our show reach more teammates and leaders just like you. Feel free to contact us via email or LinkedIn with the links in our show notes, and let us know you listened to this episode or even suggest a topic for Wayne and I to tackle in a future episode. If you'd like to learn more about remote teams, pre-order Wayne and Kevin's new book, The Long Distance Team. You can learn more about the book at longdistanceteambook.com. Thank you for joining us, and as Wayne likes to say, don't let the weasels get you down.